Okay, so good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. The video at my end isn't working, so do apologize for that. My name is Manish Malik, and I'm from School of Energy and Electronic Engineering, and I'm the Associate Head for Student Experience. And yeah, for today, we're going to talk about orchestration, in particular, student engagement and experience. And I added a couple of words to the blended and connected, and that's blended and connected learning together. So I'm going to talk about how we did that in our school. Okay, so just to give some understanding, some background to the word orchestration, it's widely used in the education literature, and we kind of already know of things that we use to orchestrate the student engagement and experience and movement and things like that, which kind of the point behind orchestration is the word itself is not in the forefront because we get used to those certain things which help us in our learning journeys and moving around in the campus. So for example, the the timetable. The timetable provides prompts of when a student needs to be where, so it orchestrates their attendance. Likewise, staff. We are used to delivering education lectures in a particular way, and for example, if it's dissemination of information or if it's peer instruction that you're doing, you're asking question and answer, you're prompting students to do things at a different time in the class, and they are following that lead. And after several iterations of that, it kind of becomes expected thing. So if you are a lecturer who goes in and disseminates um, uh, the content and then after ask questions, then the students kind of come with that expectation. And once you've done those things, the rituals in your classroom, then the students feel, that's my daily dose of my content and my Q&A, and I move on and I go back and I do something on Moodle. So that kind of is a way that people are used to so far before COVID. Um, if it's working all well, you're using all of these tricks in your classrooms and outside to orchestrate student engagement and so on. But just a little bit more about maybe the community field, which before COVID, it's students go into the library. Maybe they have a place in your building where they all congregate together. So all of those things also kind of help to build that, and there may be events run by society again, that those events kind of orchestrate um, the development of this community field. All of this, when this comes together, that's I guess what I'm trying to say is it builds the community feeling. And there are numerous other things that might be going on in the campus before we went into lockdown, and the pandemic sort of disrupted our routine. So that's a little bit of background on the term orchestration. Now, one more point before we move on is the key thing here is, if there is a routine, people do get used to that, and they internalize that routine. And if the timetable, for example, was not changing at all, it was the same lectures Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way to Friday, there would actually be no need to orchestrate if people have good memories. Of course, if you forget, yes, you have some kind of prompting mechanism in the timetable, you can go and look. But if it was exactly the same every single day, then you don't need orchestration. Then people will get used to it in their memories, and you wake up Monday morning, you have a lecture at 10 o'clock, you go to that particular room which you used to walk into. So it's almost in your neural network, and therefore there is no need. But timetable isn't that kind of constant thing. That's why there's a very much need. And even so, that need is, it kind of goes in the background, that the act of actually referring to title becomes a nature in itself, a second nature in itself. So you will do that before the lecture or your classes are there, and that kind of helps you remind and where you need to be, etc. And lecturers also will have some kind of script in their heads that gets played out in the classrooms when they're orchestrating engagement in classroom. Sometimes you post messages on forums and Moodle to bring people into an activity which you set on Moodle after the lecture and the likes. So there is a need for triggering the scripts inside the students that you're responsible for, and you do that from time to time. Okay, so why is orchestration needed? I think the two areas that are key here is just, we shouldn't assume that our students, when they are come into the university for the first time, level 4, even sometimes in level 5, and can go in on level 6 even, that they are really good at regulating their own motivations to study, their emotions around, team working, group issues, assessment, etc., and their behavior of logging into an online platform to engage in activities, etc. So all of these, you shouldn't assume that the students have that ability to regulate, and that's why orchestration is needed, to remind and to prompt and to guide students. Another thing we shouldn't really assume is about the forming and availability of good support networks, peer support networks that students already have when they come into campus. There needs to be some kind of activities and engagement that students do before these develop. So in short, orchestration is needed for this. It's for development of students as independent learners. So through giving them behaviors, giving them um, motivating prompts and statements from time to time, you're sort of bringing them into this developmental phase where they become independent and do their things themselves, and also giving them opportunities to create their peer support networks. So in the literature, if you search for script guidance theory, you'll find a lot of references to this theory in computer supported collaborative learning, actually. And it's yet to come outside of that literature into face-to-face learning and teaching environments, but it's applicable there too. SGD is, or script guidance theory, it really says that if there are different prompts and structures around student learning experience, that actually helps in triggering what they already bring into the campus. They might have some scripts for example, they might have their own time management skills that they've developed in school. They might have planning scripts which help them, do their homework in time, etc., etc. So they may come in with some scripts, and these prompts that you put in front of them, that you do this, you do that, that can help trigger those prompts and remind them, oh, this is what we're doing right now, and they can get on with that themselves and do it. Alternatively, they could expose the prompts and structures that you put in place for students, can actually expose them to new things. So talking to a peer, asking them a critical question, reflecting on learning, maybe these skills they haven't quite developed yet. So giving them these scripts could help them expose to newer ideas, newer ways of working and learning together. And that's also quite important part of this. And over time, when you've done this several times, students, if they find something useful, if you're giving them tasks to do and they find it useful, they're quite likely to internalize that and use those scripts again in future, all by themselves. Now, there's a few things that you need to really remember here is a bit of caution on trying to do that too much. If you're trying to spoon feed those instructions to the students too much, or if you're asking them to do too many things, do this, do that, very, very prescriptive, then that could come across as over scripting, and that could frustrate and demotivate students because they might feel that they've lost control of their own learning journey. So that's quite important thing. If somebody's trying to learn, and if you overdo it, then that's pretty bad. And likewise, if you underdo it, i.e., if you don't script at all, or you let them get on with it, maybe level 6 is when you should really expect that kind of autopilot mode of student, where you have content in Moodle, you have quizzes, and you've got activities, and students will take part. By that time, maybe, but in the early level 4, level 5, that sort of time period, it's quite important to give them some scripts. If you didn't give them anything, they might feel lost, and not be able to find way in a new environment. And another point is about gradually fading, and that's, as I was saying, level 4, level 5, it might be more appropriate to use the scripting, the prompts and the guidance and the structure, and gradually, if you can fade these out from the system, that should help students to become more confident in using them themselves as well, because they will remember that what they did earlier, and this time they might want to do that without the prompt even. But yeah, so keep that in mind, and the whole idea about scripting and prompts and structure and orchestration is to make students independent in the long run. So before COVID, we had the timetable. The students would click on to one of these and find out which room they're in. But since COVID, they still have this, and they can go and look whether it's a particular building or if it's an online event. Even that online event and face-to-face event differentiation isn't quite clear. When you click it, it says OL, and then first time you have to tell them that OL stands for online, and then they get used to it because they've yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, even the older mechanisms for orchestration, since we went down into lockdown and when the pandemic struck, those were not quite relevant, fully relevant. And we know we have had difficulties with making changes to timetables, because it's yeah. So just to go back now, Moodle thankfully had this wonderful tool of timeline, which kind of filled in the required gap. So if you click one of these blocks, if you're a student, you're wanting to find out where your lecture is at the moment, you can find out if it's in a building. You can walk into that building when the face-to-face was allowed, fine. But if it was an online lecture, student had to log into Moodle, quickly find the link, etc., etc. And if they didn't find it, then they can't attend. And if they took some time, they're late to the session because of that. So the timeline tool actually orchestrated that pretty well, and we found out we were running a lot of synchronous sessions, and the students were actually coming back to us and saying that if everything was on the timeline, that would be wonderful, because it's basically timing, ordering it on the basis of time, and then students can just click on one of these and come into the online lecture. But before that, what we were actually doing, we were going into the announcement part, and we were sending the links out to students saying, here is it. So we were orchestrating their attendance through the other means as well. But this timeline tool really, really helped. That just shows that we do need to do it, and once the students get used to it, it's all good. So the other part, so engagement part, how do we orchestrate student engagement such that they become independent over multiple interactions? Is through this, is through creating activities for students where they can interact with each other, help each other, learn from each other, and so on. So some kind of positive interdependence is created, so that then that not only helps form their peer support network, but also help learn and develop. So this term, self-regulation, it's very well cited in the literature. There are two new terms that kind of extends that into the social. So there's co-regulation and shared regulation. And by co-regulation, what is meant is that when people are learning together, they are externalizing their actions. So they are saying, okay, let's go into the internet, search this query. That even just saying that in front of somebody else who might not have thought that exact same approach, you're externalizing this to them, and therefore giving them a script of how to work and how to learn. how to develop your knowledge and skills. So that's that gives a good opportunity. So if your activities engage students in this way, i.e. help them to help each other, that is one way of developing independence, developing self-regulation. Likewise, if you are orchestrating some kind of group work, so prompting students to have shared goals, plans, shared monitoring, shared working, in effect, having shared regulations. So how can I? So if you're working towards a goal of completing a project, and if you have some kind of meeting notes and minutes, and they are shared with each other in the team, then that can trigger different actions in different people, because if everything is being recorded, and then there's monitoring, there's shared monitoring between the teammates, and as they progress, they're sharing their work back, so they're shared working, and they're all working towards one common goal. So there's a shared goal, and they're all in working together towards that. So that can also help externalize some of the behavior, some of the actions of people, which can then be absorbed by other teammates who do not have that those prompts in them, and that over time this can be internalized. But that it requires a lot of sort of positivity in the group. If there's conflicts and all, again, that can be a problem. So how do we actually bring these theoretical concepts into being? So in a live session, perhaps what you can do is you can ask your students to maybe watch a video. Maybe you asked them before. Maybe you asked them to watch the video before, but not everybody has watched it. So it kind of defeats the point. So when they are in a session with you, if you take 5 minutes and pause any interaction, say, go and watch that video now, then they are utilizing that synchronous time in the very activity that you want them to do. So you can ask them to watch the video, you can pass the link and wait for the duration of the video. And then you can give them some kind of question, and you can collect the responses from the students and show the collective response. So a bit of a quiz question, and ask them to do some peer instruction. We'll see an example of this in a minute. And you can put students together when they have conflicting answers, according to how they voted. So if you have a question which has good cognitive conflict in it, if students vote and they vote differently, then you can put them in pairs, or you can put them in a breakout room which has people with two different answers, and get them to defend those positions and convince the other persons in there to your answer. And then bring them back into the room, and then you can shuffle it and do that one more time and get them to vote again, and see how the class has moved. Have they all come to the right answer, or have they just gone astray? And you can act accordingly afterwards, and you can explain the answer. And that's pretty commonly used in peer instruction, this approach. But you can do that in the online environments as well, through breakout rooms and stuff. But what is important is the literature shows that if you do that kind of activity in face-to-face environments, it engages students, but does it have a lasting effect on students' learning? There's a question mark on that last bit. And a lot of new studies are sort of investigating the effect of making students reflect on what they learn. Because it's one thing to get excited and get engaged in one session, and then it's another to then internalize that information and apply it into different settings. And reflection seems to be a very good tool to trigger that kind of learning. And you can do that in the online environment using, I've written this Padlet comment before the news came that Padlet was down, but you could use anything. You can use Google Docs, or you can ask them to even record that in their own diary even. So that last step of reflecting on what you have done in that one question or many questions in a session, that's quite important, and that can be done. So here's the example of what I would say as a SALT activity, which is software assisted learning together activity in a class. So I'm going to post this link into the chat. And I just want you to quickly look at the question and make up your mind on what the correct answer is. And then when you've done that, click the link that I've posted in chat. It should take you to a form with just no question, just 4 options, A, B, and C, and D. It'll be a blank form. But the question on options are here. So what I want you to do is to choose the correct answer and and put your words in using that Google form. So just to show you what you will be doing, when you click that link that I posted, you will see something like this. Okay, and then you've got to just select one of these, A, B, C, or D, in response to the options that are here. Okay, so I can see some votes are already in. Let's see, one is in already. There are 12 of you, so I'm hoping there'll be a bit more. And we'll just wait a few seconds before we move on. It has a little delay sometimes because I've created this all myself rather than using any of the other tools like Nearpod or other voting system tools. So I've created this through Google Forms and Google Doc. So I'm just waiting for some more responses to come in, just to show the point. So the question I'll read one more time. Where does a tree gets most of its mass from? Is it air, A? Is it soil, B? Is it sunlight, C? And water, D? And at 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I'm going to show you the responses. So hopefully, yeah, so some more had actually voted. So in total, we had about 10 responses. That's great. So people have gone for D, water, and B, soil. Okay, now I want you to really reflect on that, that what you voted. What is a tree made of? I could actually put you into 2 breakout rooms at this point, but I won't do that. Don't worry. I could group you on the basis of. In fact, I'll just be able to put you into one group and make you convince each other. So I'd create a breakout room with saying option B and D, go into that. But we're all here together. So maybe if one of you wants to convince us of your voting, please take control of the mic or ask me to unmute you, and I'll do that. If anybody wants to tell us why they've gone for a particular answer. Anyone? Go on, Stuart.
I thought you might pick on me, Manish. I was in the soil camp, but I don't think I had a good reason why, which is why I wasn't volunteering an opinion. I assumed everyone else would know an answer to this and that I was being caught out.
Okay. No, at least you've been honest here, and that's great. But what about other people? Is there anybody else want to say why they chose water? Anyone? If you were to drain out all the water from the trees, what would be left?
Carbon.
Carbon, yeah.
Carbon. Okay. Well, then looking at the options here, which one do you think carbon is the most richest source?
The air, surely.
That's correct, Andy. So the correct answer would be air, because the soil is rich in minerals and nutrients, rich supply. But if it was soil, then obviously there will be a big hole in the ground after a few years, wouldn't it? Because where is the replenishment coming from? Maybe it's coming from water. Okay. Well, water, if you drain out water, and if you look at the moment, I'm sitting on my dining table, that's made of hardwood, and it's got no water in it, hopefully. So what is all that? That wood is mainly carbon, hydrocarbon actually. So some of it is actually coming from carbon, and some of it is coming from water. But carbon is a heavier element, and that's why the correct answer would be. Okay, so moving on. I did exactly the same in another session, and the importance here is if you create some kind of cognitive conflict, you're going to get some engagement. And out of the 12, we had 10 people taking part. One of them was myself, I think. So 11. Yeah. Anyways, so what I'm saying is before the discussion, you might have an answer like this. So some people said sunlight, photosynthesis. That's a very valid, first thought, because we know some trees have the ability to do photosynthesis and so on. So, and after the discussion, you can see, people were able to go to the correct answer, more people, but there were some still, and you might need to explain. So we got engagement, we got some learning, but we've got to clear some doubts still. And once you've done that, then also you've got to remember to trigger that reflection stage, is how you can use this information in a project or something else, that sort of thing. Another activity which I tend to use in my lectures and others as well in the school is about using a shared document in which, and we'll see an example. In fact, we'll do this for this very session a bit later on, so I won't show you that just yet. In that, what I do is I pre-populate with some questions, and I get students to either live, in a synchronous session on WebEx or Zoom, to get them to type into it and share the screen. So it looks very nice. Everybody is putting in their comments, and it is also anonymous, so it's fine. People want to come forward and just say their minds, and they put in, and you can then confirm in that live session what the correct answers are or what the mistakes people have made, and you can go over them and iron out any issues there. So you get engagement, you get learning, and so on. But if you were not going to do that in a live environment, you can also do that in an asynchronous environment. You can release the document, you can show the document in the class and say, before the next session, I would like you to put answers to that. And then the next session, you can do the same. You can give some feedback live, or you could choose to comment on that document. You can do it asynchronously as well. You can do the explanation and so on. So this was orchestrating engagement inside the classroom, but what about before and after? And what I found was this template that was released by the university was really fitting the bill of what I was trying to do in my classroom. For before the classroom, the weekly introduction really helps, because it says what you're going to be doing in the classroom. It highlights what you need to do. It prompts students to watch the video. So those who are independent learner, they are catered for immediately. And those who are not so independent, and they really come to the class without even watching those videos. And I know many of you will have students who are like that. So what you could do there is you could reinforce in the class that, we will spend 5 minutes watching that video. And I've just shown you that, how that works. And then ask them to take part in some kind of solved activity, which could be in the form of a quiz question. It could be in the form of a Google document that they're contributing to. And all of those links are there for them to revisit after the lecture if they want. One more thing you can add to this is the activity afterwards. Now this, you'll notice this template is pretty much following the before, during, and after prompt categories, but I've named them differently. So I want students to not only engage with videos before, and if they haven't, then we do that in the lecture, and we get them engaged in some kind of Q&A in the class. And then in the end, we want them to actually go and practice it a bit more. So then their reflections automatically come. This is a mechanism to trigger reflection, really, to mastery. So I put a quiz there, and that quiz talks about the topics that are covered in that first week session, or whatever week session it is. And they are really trying to get 100%. And I ask them to either do it individually if they want, or even pair up with the kind of people they were talking to in the class, and do it as a group-wide mastery. So group-wide mastery is really useful for projects where you have teams, because you can then ask the teams to learn the content together. And because they're learning the content together, they're knowing a bit more about each other, they're helping each other, there's positive interdependence. So all that co-regulation, all that shared regulation kicks in. and students develop trust within the team, and that's quite useful because that will be helpful later on if there's any conflict. And it's been shown in psychology literature that trust is key to overcome team conflicts. So there's that. So I really say well done to the team who created these the prompt the template. It's been really useful for me and for the students. They've been saying very positive things about this as well. So thanks for you know, getting us to look at this and really gelled in with my own practice. Okay, we move on from orchestration of attendance to orchestration of engagement to orchestration of group work. The first thing that comes to mind when you're talking about group work is how do you create those groups or teams? Are they done randomly? So have a think about the positives and the negative sides of doing that. Are they based on some skills that the students have? You can maybe ask students to self-declare their skills that they bring to the team. Maybe not so effective in level 4. Maybe they're looking at you and saying, what skills do I have? I still have to develop them. But in level 6, maybe, level 7, level 5 even sometimes, and sometimes even at level 4. So if you get them to highlight these skills on Padlet or a Google Doc, that's helps people to know and form teams. Or you could run some kind of pre-made survey. There's a link here to Clifton's Strengths Indicator, I think, which is used in other universities where they're getting people to find out by taking part in that survey what their skills are and then share that with their teammates. And that way, there's some kind of initial sort of cognitive trust developing through the use of this external survey, saying, okay, this survey tells me I'm good at organizing, I'm good at leading, I'm good at timekeeping, I'm good at, you know, getting records shared with each other, things like that. So that survey, if there's something that you administer like that at the beginning, that could help people settle into roles. Or you could do something like this. You could have a knowledge-based, you know, external survey or a quick pre-test at the beginning of the team creation, and that helps. And you share the marks within the teammates if they're willing to do that, and that could help build some kind of cognitive trust between the teams. There are 3 aspects of trust. One is cognitive, the other is affective, and then there is cognitive trust. Cognitive trust refers to things like you're saying something and you're always doing that. So there's some kind of reliability in you. Affective trust is you are approachable as a teammate. When somebody comes to you, you help them. Then that way you develop cognitive trust. Affective trust. And the cognitive trust is obviously to do with the content knowledge. If you are wanting to orchestrate team interactions, the key mantra there is to do it early and often. So the more often you have team meetings with students, the better it is. And right from the beginning, it sort of sets gets people to know each other really. It also helps in building trust. If they are interacting for a longer period of time, it's much better. I've tried using breakout rooms, but we are using WebEx, and it's not really working because WebEx breakout rooms don't do a good job of that. Zoom is much better, but we're kind of stuck with WebEx because our students are used to it. So maybe next semester, next teaching block, I might switch completely to Zoom with the initial phase of getting to know the platform, and then maybe the breakout rooms will work much better in there. But yeah, so you could instill some behaviors in people in terms of trying to get to know each other from the very beginning through these interactions in breakout rooms. So that could help. Again, I find that setting some kind of ground rules helps people. So if you orchestrate that in the beginning, saying, okay, how often will you meet and how often will you talk to each other? What gaps will be there in communication in terms of time period? Who will do the leadership? Will there be rotation around leadership? Because that sort of helps with avoiding conflicts around, I want to be a leader. Somebody says, I want to be a leader. that kind of. So if you have these rules discussed in the beginning and then they follow it, it's much likely to succeed. And as a last resort, I ask students to copy me if their teammate aren't really engaging at all and responding according to those ground rules, as a last resort. But if you've tried a few times and if you've not got a response from your teammate, I say that's a situation of difficulty. You want engagement from the students in your team. The leader should, or the person who's taking minutes could do that bit. And I've talked about group-wide mastery as well before, so that helps with building the knowledge in each one of the members of the team. Imagine a team where there's some people who know the subject and some don't. That team is already fragmented. So if everybody has the knowledge and that is required to do the task that you're setting them, then that's a very good starting point. But it also needs another element, which is the trust between the teammates, that they all know the content, they all know that they will be there for each other, and they all know that they are going to take part. So those three elements of trust, which is affective, cognitive, and cognitive. But group-wide mastery kind of helps to build that, and we've shown that in a research project that I'm involved with, in as short as 4 weeks. But in a normal environment, it takes about 8 weeks for this kind of trust to build. Okay, one thing I tried this time and it worked quite well was meeting teams with. So I actually did with Zoom alongside WebEx. So I shared my Zoom in WebEx, and I was talking to teams, and the whole class was able to hear that discussion, and they were able to hear the questions that the teammates were asking of me and my responses to them, and that kind of triggered them to do the same when I called them in that Zoom meeting. So it's that modeling of that behavior that I want people to do it. I have to orchestrate it first time around, especially in this online environment. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And it worked. And then Christmas arrived, and then we're now in January, and I tried to replicate that thing again, and it seems students seem to have forgotten that behavior. So it takes a multiple time iterations. That's for it to be internalized and so on. Okay, yeah, there are some more suggestions here, which I'm sure if you, I won't go through each one of them, it's quite a lot. But I want you to share what you have been doing. So in terms of orchestrating, and I'm sure now you realize that you're doing these kind of orchestrations as well, without even knowing, and what is it that you're doing. So what I'm going to do is give you a link to this document, and this could be our SALT activity for our sharing of our knowledge. So there you go. The link is in the chat. So please come on to this document, and you can say if you want which school you're from, and you can share your. If you want, I can make it anonymous as well. So you can see how I'm doing that quite quickly. I can make it anonymous. Then you don't have to. If you don't want to share your details. Yeah, so your suggestions for orchestrating student engagement experience, what you have been doing in the blended and connected learning, if you can, unfortunately, Stuart, it won't now make you anonymous because I changed the mode in the middle of the session. So over to you guys. If you have any questions, or while you are typing in, I'll try and summarize what you share. I'll read the chat messages as well. Okay, so we just have 5 minutes. So if you can just share some of your suggestions that you've been using to engage students, that'd be very useful for the rest of us. Or if you have any questions for me, you can post them in the chat. Kim has already posted in the chat quite a long paragraph about these approaches. So thanks for that, Kim. No, he's already gone. So. Oh, so the anonymous thing doesn't work actually. Maybe I should have set it up from the beginning as anonymous. That's
Sorry if I broke that by arriving too early.
No idea why that happened. So over to people. If you have questions, if you want to ask, please feel free to.
If I may, while I'm already unmuted, I think that I really appreciate you sharing these really concrete examples. But I think the main thing I've taken away is just the concept of orchestration. I think, as you said just now, that this is something which a lot of us are doing already, and it's the kind of thing which I think I've been advocating for without that term. So I'm just really pleased to have something to call this.
Yeah, it helps, doesn't it? You know, the timetable has always been there, but it goes in the background, and it does its job very beautifully. And the moment there's a change in the timetable, that's when we come to know the importance of orchestration. You know, if something goes wrong in the timetable, that's everybody shouts, something's gone terribly wrong here. So structure, I mean, I'm thinking about students with neurodiversity, students with, social communication disorders as well. And I've found, especially in engineering, that the moment something is structured, it goes down really well with the students. The moment there are prompts around things, it just makes it much easier, because there's lots of links, there's lots of things to go through, and structure really helps. It helps me anyway, but I'm sure people are there who don't benefit as much with these structures and prompts, but there are those who do. So
I would agree with Stuart there, Manish. I think it's a really nice thing. It fits in with the blended analogy. I've got this image of you sitting on top of an orchestra with your baton doing the whole, and a colleague of mine that tries, it is a bit like good learning is a bit like conducting an orchestra. You've got to pull all the bits together, and it's like that, the idea of creating the journey. They've done the work, and you're then just guiding them through. I also love the salt, how to change your blend. You add a little bit of salt to it. I just think that the analogies that we're beginning to get around the whole concept of what we're trying to do is working really well.
And I'd like to say one more thing here, Andy, because you mentioned that it's like an orchestra, but it's not like an orchestra till the time your students are trained for your orchestration.
Exactly.
So in the first year, they are getting used to your orchestration. They're also getting used to the knowledge content. And until that time happens, you can't let it go in autopilot mode. You have to do something.
So Manish, can I ask in that kind of like regard, when you bring your students in at level 4, are they doing some central study skills modules, and are you actually talking to them about the nature of orchestration? So you're talking to us about orchestrating and how it works. Are you using that same language with the students so they understand what you're trying to do as well?
I don't use the same word, but I make sure that I'm doing the things that orchestrate their engagement, and then after some time I remind them. I do reinforce the key actions on behaviors, and even if I can help it in a team situation, if I can help bring out the emotions in team members, and so I'll do the things, but I won't use the term as such. But I know what I'm doing, so yeah. I don't know if that helps. I'm not saying the same language to them.
I think it's very interesting, and I think it's a faculty and university initiative we need, because in one level 4 module I teach, it's the business ops and systems management, so it's one of the biggest modules. We actually devoted the first seminar to these sorts of things. Here's Moodle, this is the weekly structure. Here's the Pelogo link. This is what, do you think this is a fair expectation on you? It's made bugger all difference, to be honest. And I suspect it's made bugger all difference because they've got so much messaging from so many quarters, and with the best will in the world, we didn't collaborate with any other module on a consistent approach. And I think there's this, particularly with COVID, there's this flood of information. And as we discussed in a previous class of this fest, I think a lot of students have simply withdrawn. So I really like the way that you've presented this, Manish. And I guess, if I was back in corporate life, I would be saying, right, consistent message, get rid of the other messages, valuable though they are, they will wait. The most important message when they come on campus is we build something around this to get that step in the door, get them stepping in the door of all these tools. But thank you, Manish.
No, thank you. I heard your point in the previous session where you're saying that 50% of your students, we don't know where they are, and I share that. Even with this orchestration, sometimes on some days you'll get half the class. Some days you get less than half. Some days you get 75%. But you're never actually ever going to get the full 100%. And especially with large classes that you're talking lots of students. So it is hard. It is very hard, and we can only do so many things. But we have to remember that when we send out a message, we send out to everybody. So it's really difficult to strike that balance. If you're trying to overdo the scripting for the ones who are following you, with the ones who are not. So you really have that extra work to do. You find out who are not coming and then send them a separate message if you can. But it's very hard.
Yeah, what I'd like to ask is, the problem with our students learning at work is they're all on different programs. We're trying to engage them in sort of learning management modules. They're all working full time, so we try and give opportunities at different times of the day, but the take up is out of 400 students, 1 or 2. And one of the things we've discovered is by emailing students, they just stop reading them, I think, because they get bombarded by emails from the university. I wondered whether anyone's successfully used a different way of contacting through. What we really need to do is to text them, but the whole data protection, and I don't know. Apparently, it's difficult.
I think, Fiona, what you said there, I totally relate to that, because they with the online, I work, on my DL program as well, and it's the same. People are working, and it's difficult to have a synchronous moment with all of them involved, and hence the use of asynchronous is going to be much better suited for that. And then I showed 2 different SALT activities. One was in real time, asking a quiz question. The other one was using kind of Google Docs with prompts and questions and activities for them to take part. And you can use that in the 1 hour session that you have with 10 of them out of the 100 that are on the course, and record that. And at least those who are engaging at a different time can see what happened in that asynchronous document, and maybe chip in later, or at least just read. Reading is enough engagement for the ones who has not even been able to come to your live session. Synchronous tends to be difficult for people who are at full-time work.
Can I just come in on Fiona's point about comms? Perhaps just to add an industry take on that, because I used to chair a large industry group, and we used to send a lot of emails out. And we were told that you're sending too many emails out, stop doing it. And I think it's about consolidation. It's about having 1 email a week at the right time that has everything in it, and that's it. And then other bits and bobs you can potentially put on Moodle as FAQs, but to try and put everything in one time communication so they know when it's coming, and just try and get everything in one, and then work across a team to say, actually, they're going to be staggered across the week. You're not going to get them all in one go, but that takes a bit of discussion with a bigger team to think about how you're going to plan communications. In an ideal world, it should be 1 comm from a route in a week where everybody's putting everything that they want. That's really challenging, but the feedback we've had from students is less is more, because they don't feel inundated. Look at the amount of emails that we get, and how often do you just go delete? And we do, let's be honest. So again, it's a difficult, and what I think today is drawn up. Manish, has been a brilliant session. Thank you. There's lots of things that we don't know the answer to. For example, why aren't we getting student attendance? What are the key drivers behind them not appearing? If half your orchestra didn't show up, you are not in a good place.
True. True. One more thing about the when you said about the SMS, I've had some colleagues who are using WhatsApp groups. So if one channel it gets completely ignored by the student, if you can open another, but okay, keep in mind what Andy said, that if you over orchestrate, it's going to get ignored as well.
Yes,
So,
I mean, we can arrange for the Learning at Work team to only send out one email per week. In fact, we don't even send that sometimes, but it's because they get bombarded from all the university as well, and most of which are not relevant to them because they're not on campus, as well as having all their work emails, so they don't always
This is a big. When I was at Try, it was a big discussion, and I think we came to the point that where we said we cannot necessarily turn off all these comm lines because they have to exist. But I think the answer was we were working to a situation where we gave the student the optionality to dip in and dip out of certain lines of communication that they didn't feel relevant to them. So they could unsubscribe, and then they could prioritize the most important ones. So at least they could get the key messages actually coming through.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Thanks for your questions and coming along. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed.
Anne's got her hand up.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see that. My bad. Where is it?
Muted.
Oh, sorry, I didn't deliberately put my hand up, but I was curious about software-assisted learning together. Is that a kind of term recognised in the literature?
It isn't, because it's my term.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've just Googled that and it's not there. So yeah, it's I love that.
No, that's just my own how I see it. I built a system called COGL, which was it stands for Computer Orchestrated Group Learning Environment, and that was part of my PhD. And in analyzing all the data, and then at one moment, it just struck me that what I'm doing is I'm doing software orchestrated, software assisted or orchestrated, learning together, and that's what I want to bring into my classroom, even when I'm not using COGL, because it will help. But I can't be with all the teams and all the students all the time. So using a computer orchestrated, orchestrating tool is for me the way forward. But that's when I came up with this term.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's a neat heading for the different activities.
Thank you.
Okay, shall we leave that there then? Thank you, Manish, for a really interesting session. As with all the others, it's been recorded if you do want to revisit it. We have our final sessions coming up in about 5 minutes. One about QR codes for augmented reality learning, and one about getting the most out of Moodle stats. So 2 very different things. So I'm sure you'll find something that you could be interested in. Thank you all for joining us, and thanks again, Manish, for a great session.
Thanks, Vinesh.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Really cool.
Thank you.